aliens disclosure. UFO 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 aliens disclosure. Let's go.
Instead of just speculating today, we're going on a deep dive
Okay, love it.
into some real sources to see what we can actually learn.
Sounds good to me.
And those two sources today are the 2024 UAP Disclosure Act, which, by the way, is part of the real National Defense Authorization Act.
Yeah, that's a big deal.
Right. This isn't just, fringe stuff. This is legislation that's pushing the government to declassify, all sorts of information on these unidentified aerial phenomena.
Yeah, it's huge.
And then we're going to jump way back in time to ancient Sumerian tablets. I'm talking like 4000 BCE, which is almost impossible to even imagine.
Yeah, it's hard to grasp how long ago that really was.
Right. And what's crazy is these tablets, they don't just tell stories, they actually contain scientific knowledge that's shockingly advanced for their time.
Super interesting stuff.
So by the end of this deep dive, you'll have a much better sense of the facts ETS surrounding both of these topics. And who knows, maybe you'll even start to see some connections between them.
Looking forward to it.
Okay, so let's start with this UAP Disclosure Act. The real deal, passed in 2024. What does it actually say?
Well, basically, it's a 7-year plan for the government to, slowly release declassified UAP information to the public.
And the big thing here, I think, is the bipartisan support it got. It's not just one side pushing for this. It really shows that the government as a whole is recognizing that people are demanding more transparency about what's going on. And not just the public, but even folks within the government itself.
Yeah, everyone seems to be, really curious about UAPs these days.
Absolutely. And the act, it sets up this independent oversight board, too. Which is kind of like a safety net, right? They're there to ensure that the information being released is accurate and that it's being done responsibly.
So no massive document dumps hitting the internet anytime soon, huh?
Probably not. Good to know. But, think about the implications of this act. It's not just about satisfying everyone's curiosity, right? This could revolutionize scientific research, influence economic policies, even change how we tell stories about ourselves in the universe.
Absolutely. I mean, that brings up so many questions about how we process information and what it means for us as humans.
Right. How do we even begin to process the idea that we might not be alone in the universe? And that brings us to our second source for this deep dive, those ancient Sumerian tablets I mentioned.
Okay, yeah, let's talk about those.
So these clay tablets, some of them date back to 4000 BCE, like we said. And they give us a glimpse into one of the world's oldest civilizations, the Sumerian.
It's fascinating. Their civilization had complex systems of writing, agriculture, and even governance.
Right. And their writing system, cuneiform, is one of the earliest known forms of writing. I mean, think about that. They were writing stuff down thousands of years ago.
It's incredible how much they were able to document.
And it wasn't just grocery lists or something, right? They were recording myths and legends, they were tracking astronomical movements, and they developed a complex system of mathematics.
It's pretty mind-blowing when you consider how long ago this was.
Let's talk about the Sumerian myth, specifically about these beings called the Anunnaki. You've probably heard of them. They're all over the internet, often connected to ancient aliens.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So who are the Anunnaki? Well, in the Sumerian creation myth, they're basically these powerful gods who, descended from the heavens. And according to the myth, they interacted with humans, they shaped human civilization.
They were central figures in the Sumerian pantheon.
Right. And of course, there are some pretty bold interpretations out there about the Anunnaki, like the author Zecharia Sitchin. He straight up argued that the Anunnaki were extraterrestrial beings.
Oh yeah, his work is pretty fascinating.
Right. So according to Sitchin, these Anunnaki, they came to Earth, they engineered humans, they kind of kickstarted our whole civilization.
He definitely put forward some controversial ideas.
He did. And it's important to remember that, his views aren't universally accepted. Most scholars, they tend to see the Anunnaki as symbolic deities, not literal aliens.
Right. It's more about understanding the Sumerian belief system and how they viewed the world.
Right. So gods, not aliens. But even without the whole alien angle, there's still some really interesting stuff on these tablets. How do they know about planets that we couldn't even see without telescopes until, much, much later?
Yeah, that's a great question.
I mean, they had descriptions of our solar system, and they were surprisingly accurate. They even had details about planets like Uranus, Neptune, and get this, Pluto.
Whoa.
I know, right? We only officially discovered Pluto in 1930. How is that even possible?
It's pretty mind-blowing, isn't it?
It really is. So how do we explain that? I mean, were they just that much smarter than everyone else back then?
Well, there are a few possible explanations.
Yeah.
One is that they were just incredibly good at observing the night sky.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. No light pollution back then.
Exactly. And they could have passed down their astronomical knowledge through generations. So over time, they could have built up this detailed understanding of the cosmos.
Okay. So centuries of stargazing lead to some pretty impressive knowledge. That makes sense. But still, Pluto.
It's definitely something to ponder.
It is. And it's not just the planets themselves, right? Like, they had this idea of a celestial sphere with Earth at the center, and all the stars were revolving around it.
Yeah, which we now know isn't how the universe works. But it was a dominant model for a long time.
Can you imagine trying to explain to someone from 4000 BCE that Earth isn't the center of everything? Like, what would their reaction even be?
I can only imagine. It just goes to show how much our understanding of the universe has evolved over time.
And how much we still have to learn.
Exactly.
So the Sumerians were clearly sharp when it came to astronomy, but they also had this fascinating mathematical system. They were using base 60, which to me sounds so complicated compared to our, base 10 system.
Yeah. It's true. Base 60 might seem strange to us now, but they used it for everything, from measuring time to calculating angles.
And it helped them achieve remarkable accuracy in their calculations.
They were really quite sophisticated.
Try doing long division in base 60. I can barely handle it in base 10.
I hear you.
But seriously, this advanced knowledge, the astronomy, the math, it really makes you wonder, were the Sumerians just like way ahead of their time? Or is there something else going on that we just don't fully understand?
That's the question, isn't it? And as we dig deeper into these Sumerian tablets, we're going to uncover even more intriguing examples of their advanced knowledge. Stuff that continues to puzzle researchers today.
I'm ready. Let's dive in. So it wasn't just their base 60 system.
No, not at all.
That made them mathematical rock stars.
Right.
Like, what else?
Well, get this. They had a concept of zero, which seems basic to us now, but back then it was a huge leap forward. They were grappling with the idea of nothingness.
That's wild. It's like, how do you even come up with that when you're building a whole civilization from scratch?
Right. It shows you how intellectually curious they were.
Yeah.
And how they weren't afraid to think outside the box. And it wasn't all just theory either. They used this stuff practically. I mean, the geometry, it was super advanced for the time. And they used it in architecture, engineering. They even designed irrigation systems with it.
That's a really good point,
Yeah.
It's easy to get, caught up in the wow factor of ancient knowledge.
Totally.
But you have to remember, they were building a whole society. This wasn't just like some, isolated geniuses in a tower.
Yeah, it was all interconnected.
Right, exactly. Speaking of interconnectedness, though, we were talking about those Anunnaki. Do you think any of this Sumerian knowledge, especially that astronomy stuff, could be linked to them?
You mean like the Anunnaki gave them some kind of cosmic cheat sheet?
Yeah. I mean, if they were real, is that even remotely possible?
I mean, it's fun to think about. But, we got to be honest. There's just, no solid evidence for that.
Okay, so it's probably more likely they just figured it out themselves.
Yeah.
Through observation and being super smart.
Exactly. I mean, they were dedicated to recording what they saw, passing down knowledge through generations. And they were also, really good at connecting the dots, seeing patterns.
Okay. Yeah, so maybe no alien tutor?
Probably not.
But brilliant in their own right, for sure. Which kind of brings us back to their myths, right? Like the Epic of Gilgamesh.
Oh, yeah. Such a powerful story.
I know. It's about a king's search for immortality.
Right.
But it also touches on, friendship, loss, meaning of life, even accepting death. Heavy stuff.
And it still resonates, even after thousands of years.
I think that's because those questions, what's the point of it all? Is there more out there? Those are things every human wonders about. And it makes me think about our fascination with UAPs today. Maybe it's the same impulse, that ancient need to understand what we don't know.
Yeah, it's like the Sumerians were asking the same questions we are. Are we alone? Where do we come from?
And what's our place in this crazy universe?
Exactly. That's why those Sumerian tablets are so fascinating. It's like a window into how an entire civilization wrestled with those big existential questions.
And it reminds us that even though science has come so far since then, those core human desires for knowledge and meaning,
UFO aliens. disclosure. UFO alien disclosure. UFO alien disclosure. UFO alien disclosure. Let's go.